Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, honored guests, to the 5th Local Climate Solutions for Africa Congress. This session looks at exploring urban natural assets in Africa and showcasing the Una Rivers and Una Coast project to uncover key lessons learned as to how urban areas can better protect and enhance their natural assets for increased climate resilience. The Una project aims to bridge the gap between planning and nature to find innovative mechanisms and processes by which we can mainstream nature into urban planning processes and policy. And the journey that we will take you on today will be comprised of a number of interviews from key players within the UNA program, and then move on to an exciting multimedia program, which will display the processes, case studies, guidelines, tools, and mechanisms that UNA project and programs have produced to date. We welcome you to the session and we look forward to engaging with you. So welcome to the UNA Showcase session, Jess, and thank you for joining us today at the 5th LoCS4Africa. We would like to ask you a few questions about the UNA program, which you've been leading for a number of years. Please, can I start by asking you to introduce yourself and your role in UNA?
So my name's Jess Kavanagh, and as Taryn said, for the last 6 years, I've been project or program manager of the Urban Natural Assets for Africa program, which is now being implemented in 8 different cities and 6 different African countries.
Great, thanks, Jess. And I think the first question we'd like to ask you is, how was the UNA project designed?
So there were a number of principles that were absolutely critical for the project and the project team. One of which was the fact that we wanted the program to be needs-based. So it's got a very, very strong element of listening to local decision makers, very local politicians and technical officers, and really understanding their context, understanding their needs, and designing activities that align with that and really address those needs. Because in the past we've noticed that a few times it's very, very top down in terms of designing projects and activities, and we didn't want this program to be like that. We really wanted it to be needs based and actively make an impact at the local level. So that was one principle. Another principle was about being adaptive and flexible. So that also kind of leads, it's like complementary of a needs-based project where you need to be able to be adaptive and experimental and innovative so that you can address the needs that keep arising from a needs-based project, but also being able to be flexible, to be able to allow you really to interrogate almost the structural conditions of why those needs are there, because often the needs is just a plaster over some very structural challenge or opportunity that city officials are facing. So I think in terms of what the project, how it was designed with these kind of principles at its heart. And then with those principles, we had 4 key aims. The first one was to really understand what was going on in the city and what natural assets were in the city, because fundamentally this project is around trying to improve nature or nature considerations, improve them in decision making. So mainstream them, integrate them into land use planning and decision making in these African cities. So we wanted to understand. The first aim was understanding what natural assets were in the city at a local level. The second one was then provide the space to mainstream those into planning by improving the relationships between your environmentalists and your decision makers or your planners. The third aim was then linked with that was improved coordination, but also around kind of facilitating this collaboration between different departments in a city, but also multi-level governance, so between local and national government. And then the last aim was then on the ground change, so trying to really, pick up a spade and a seedling and bring biodiversity back into cities, use nature-based solutions to overcome various challenges like flooding, and ultimately build climate resilience through nature-based solutions.
Thank you. And you mentioned relationships. So how has the UNA project sought to build partnerships, and can you give some examples?
Thanks. Yeah, so that was also another big kind of principle actually in this design phase of UNA, which was understanding that relationships, trust, and partnerships are absolutely key for transformative change. And so we've spent a huge amount of time building those relationships in the cities, not only across departments between, like, for example, environmentalists and planners, but also with other city actors, very, very important city actors, private companies, private industry, and also communities. And I'll go into the community partnership now because I think it's probably the most critical. And then also partnerships between local and national government, acknowledging that national really does play a vital role in decision making at a local level, particularly around finance and finance flows. So we also had that multi-level governance kind of partnership where we focused on. But in terms of communities, because we had this like implementation arm to the project, we really wanted to see local change at a local scale. And so it was absolutely critical that we firstly provided support to create this enabled relationship between city officials and their community, and then also kind of brought the community on board to really take ownership of those local projects. And so we spent a lot of time building that local ownership and building that enabled environment, that enabled relationship between city officials and communities, which has been very, very exciting and been quite a big learning curve as well.
Fantastic. And this session is going to look at showcasing the outcomes and the outputs of the UNA project. Could you talk a bit about the processes involved in the project? I know these have been critical to supporting both an enabling environment, but also the products that have been developed within the program.
Sure. So I think the main process that we followed under UNA has been the word co-production or co-design. And what we mean by that is really bringing people together, all the kind of key actors in a city that are very, very crucial for protecting nature and for climate resilience together in a room, for them to generate information together, to learn together, to reflect together. Because we found that it's that process of getting them together and really, like, as I say, generating knowledge and talking and having tension areas arise that is so profound at kind of creating entry points for this mainstreaming of nature. Because through those dialogues, so many doors open that we would never have been able to understand, or never be able to know that there was even that door there if you didn't get those actors all in a room together. So our process is very much about focusing on those softer elements of transformative change, which is really about relationship building, knowledge construction, reflecting, learning, and providing these spaces for these entry points for mainstreaming to emerge organically, which then are then taken forward through the project. But in terms of this session, which is kind of like compiling everything and showcasing the project and showcasing impact, we've also been spending huge amount of time trying to consolidate all our evidence and all our evidence or impact, the proof of impact. And because this project's been running for 6 years now. And so in terms of that process that I've just spoken about, we've got huge amount of evidence to show that actually does work. We have been able to make practice reform, policy reform. We've been able to build capacity. We've been able to localize the SDGs and your Aichi biodiversity targets, the Sendai framework and the Paris Agreement and all the other international frameworks through these methods. And we've got lots of evidence and proof of that. So that's really, really exciting. And we're currently in the process of developing these impact stories to show just how much impact we've made through the program under those kind of key umbrellas of, practice reform and policy reform, and using our methodology and our approach.
So process really is key.
Process is everything.
Can I start by asking you to introduce yourself and your position, organization, and your role in the UNA project?
So hi everyone, my name is Elika Hermansson-Török and I'm a senior advisor at SwedBio, based at Stockholm Resilience Center in Stockholm, Sweden. I've been involved in the UNA program since the very start in 2014, and SwedBio is funding and also actively contributing to this program.
Thanks, Elika. And would you like to tell us a bit about where the concept for UNA came from?
Yes, of course. So the concept has been developed by ICLI in close collaboration with the project cities and with some input also by the partners SwedBio and Stockholm Resilience Center. Back in 2014, when ICLI and SwedBio started discussing the UNA collaboration, we were of course aware that there are no blueprints for how to integrate biodiversity and nature-based solutions into urban land use planning. Why we jointly decided that this project should be based on the different cities' actual needs and also on experimentation and adaptive management. And well, if you ask me, I think this approach has been rather successful.
Fantastic. And with that in mind, why is it therefore critical to work with cities when it comes to planning and urban natural assets?
Well, as we all know, we already live on an urban planet, and very soon 70% of the world's population will be living in cities and will be needing urban natural assets, biodiversity, for their livelihoods and well-being. And without planning for natural assets and nature-based solutions in cities, urban green and blue areas will likely disappear as the cities rapidly grow. That's why it's so important to focus on planning.
And you have been involved in UNA from the start, as you mentioned, and you've actively participated in many of the activities within the project. Can I ask, what are some of the most memorable activities you've been involved in over the years?
Oh, I have so many wonderful memories, but if I would mention 3 highlights, that would be the walking workshop in Kisumu, Kenya, where we practiced urban tinkering to come up with practical and affordable solutions to problems along an urban river stretch. The use of the popular computer game Minecraft to increase the participation by women and youth in urban planning in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And then lastly, I will never forget when I was invited to join the well-known Malawian musician Lulu when he promoted his new song, Rivers for Life, a song that he had produced for the UNA program to support public awareness of the need to protect our rivers. We visited 5 informal market areas in the capital Lilongwe, where we handed out CDs for free. And people went just crazy. Everyone wanted a copy. And only days later, we heard taxi drivers playing the song in their cars.
Wonderful. And I think one of the things we're going to profile in this session is some of those activities and some of the videos and the multimedia that's come out of those activities. But on top of the local activities and the on-the-ground work, the project also aims to integrate local messages into the global narrative. Could you give an example of how the project has supported this aim?
Well, through the years, the 6 years, the project partners have organized numerous side events at international meetings where the project results and learnings have been communicated and fed into global high-level discussions and negotiations in different ways. So bringing forward local messages to global audiences, I think, have informed and shifted the discussions in important ways.
And that's one of the really exciting aspects of UNA, is that it's taking the local message to the global audience, which we often don't see in many projects. It usually works at one level. So that's fantastic to hear. And for any of the delegates attending this meeting who are interested in this nexus of planning and nature, what would your take-home message be to them?
view informal areas as unserviced instead of unplanned, and then help service them through nature-based solutions. The large informal areas that we see in many cities today will only grow. It's impossible to replace them with formally planned areas. So we better accept them and work with them.
Wonderful. And I think we're going to showcase in this session a number of different alternative planning options and methodologies that can be used to put that into action on the ground. So Elika, we'd like to thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. And we know that you'll be joining us for the session. And we hope that this showcase really takes the opportunity to show many of the activities, the processes, case studies and outputs that have been developed during the UNA program. Thank you for your time. Jumping straight into sharing some of the key products developed during the UNA project, we would like to share with you the series of 11 handbooks that were developed by the city's Biodiversity Centre, a global centre hosted by LoCS4Africa. The handbooks aim to show key considerations for integrating urban natural assets into city planning and decision-making processes in Africa. Handbook 1 looks at the key pillars of the UNA program approach. The nature pathway that was developed by LoCS4Africa for the Cities with Nature initiative outlines 9 steps that guide cities in their efforts to incorporate nature-based solutions into policies, planning, and decision-making. The fundamentals of this approach, informed by the UNA program methodology, is underpinned by 10 key pillars. These pillars include building on existing work, aligning with city needs, understanding institutional structures, building strong relationships, focusing on process, embracing reflective and adaptive processes, tailor-making solutions to challenges, creating transformative spaces, unpacking causational links, and engaging with communities. Handbook 2 looks at alternative approaches to planning with nature and takes a deep dive into prioritization mapping in Malawi. To build resilient cities and prevent urban encroachment on open green spaces, a novel way of thinking is required that shifts the focus from simply demarcating natural assets on land use maps, planning around nature, to using nature as a tool to guide city planning, planning with nature. Handbook 3 looks at innovative approaches to planning in an African context, and in particular, the urban tinkering approach in Malawi, which used various alternative African-specific planning approaches, which we have identified and are currently applying in the UNA cities. One such approach is urban tinkering, which was implemented in the Longwe, Malawi, to address the challenge of waste disposal. Handbook 4 looks at working with formal and informal governance structures and the key learnings that LoCS4Africa has developed from not only the UNA program, but other projects that have been implemented. LoCS4Africa has developed a sound methodology for understanding and working with informal governance structures. Our approach really relies on regular face-to-face engagements with key players at various levels, documentation of the dynamics within the stakeholder group, and mandate mapping, and ensuring a respect for the sensitivity of the information discussed. Of course, with the global pandemic, we have switched to virtual meetings and are applying these principles and adapting our methodologies and approaches. Handbook 5 looks at the value of working with informality to really improve collaboration at an informal market in Malawi. As part of the Una Rivers Restoration Project at the informal riverside markets in Malawi, it became clear that the existence of fairly formal governance structures within the informal sector makes collaboration between cities and communities not just possible, but easier than expected. By tapping into these official entry points within informal structures, we found that we can build important alliances and foster change faster. Handbook 6 looks at involving community members in planning and implementation by using creative tools to encourage local participation and action. it really is critical to involve community members, those individuals who are on the ground and closest to the problems in urban planning processes and in the implementation of practical solutions, which is critical to ensure that we accurately identify cities' needs and promote the success and longevity of development projects. Handbook 7 looks at the importance of relationship building, fostering trust through time investment and innovative interactive exercises. The UNA program makes relationship building a priority. By working with the same city over an extended period of time, this ensures that we're fostering trust, and by facilitating engagement spaces and interactive learning activities that bring different stakeholders together to jointly reflect and problem solve. Handbook 8 looks at creating spaces for reflection and effective dialogue, providing a number of unique methods to build capacity and share knowledge, including innovative games and interactive exercises that equip participants with new tools and understanding to address everything from process to project coordination. Handbook 9 looks at really prioritizing process, bridging the divide between these different sectors and disciplines, the process of visioning and scenario planning, imagining possible futures for cities, have proven to be instrumental in bringing about change. For example, in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, when all the relevant stakeholders were involved, these approaches not only led to meaningful results, they also bridge the divide between disciplines and encourage fundamental shifts in perspective. Handbook 10 looks at creating change through on-the-ground implementation and how we can use this to protect urban natural assets. In Malawi and Ethiopia, plans for the protection and restoration of urban natural assets have been successfully translated into concrete action, and a number of UNA project activities have taken place at selected target sites. These include practical training, knowledge sharing, composting and greening initiatives, river cleanup exercises, among others. Handbook 11 looks at multi-level engagement and really improving national and local working relationships through dialogues. This provides an opportunity to create space for collaboration and coordination and to mobilize resources and synchronize nature-related work. So that is a brief insight into some of the theory and learnings captured as part of the UNA program, and we will now share insights from on-the-ground implementation work within UNA. Moving from implementation to planning, one of the alternative planning approaches that was trialed or tested within the UNA program was the urban tinkering approach. And urban tinkering means looking at editing or tweaking various areas within the city and using what's already there to address local challenges and to then bring in aspects such as nature to try and address some of those challenges. for example, flooding. So it can have a massive potential for unplanned or unserviced areas, and has a variety of opportunities. It's relatively low cost investment. It can be scaled, so we can go from small interventions that can be replicated across cities to much larger scale projects and interventions. It's relatively low on operation and maintenance. It engenders community buy-in because the community are encouraged to participate in the development of the particular aspect or intervention. And this has been trialed in a number of cities within the UNA program, one of which was in Kisumu, Kenya, and we'd like to invite you to watch a short video which profiles the walking workshop, which was the methodology used as the springboard for the urban tinkering within Kisumu.
Tinkering is kind of like tweaking, editing, working with various pockets of the city to be able to use what's already on the ground to overcome the complex challenges. So the potential for African city officials is massive. For example, like what we're doing today is looking at a river system and how various pockets on the river we can use nature to be able to deal with the issues like flooding and waste and nutrient imbalance in the rivers.
You are going to identify the problem, as I said. You are going to take photos. We will also come with the solution. Each group is going to identify the problem, solutions. We'll take photos, then we'll discuss when we get back to the hotel. Huh?
A number of our girls have always been hijacked and wrapped in these bushes. Yes. So if this place can be cleared, then it will be able to enhance the security even for our girls and other people, which is doable.
There is a lot of floods, and we have almost 3,500 kids in total. Huh? So they normally get affected, even they can be home for 2 or 3 weeks. Huh? When we have a flood because of Awuji, you can see the sorry state of Awuji.
We still have an opportunity to reclaim the glory of the river and make it useful to the residents, because actually as we were walking we saw the cows drinking, women fetching water, and most importantly we have to involve the community in doing this, because with that they will have a sense of ownership.
We need to work together, yes, as the government and as the community, to make sure that we have our natural resource, which is a real asset and not a threat to our lives.
Together we can.
Thank you.
UNA focuses on partnerships, and we'd like to invite our colleagues at KDI to share some of the work they've been doing and their engagement with the UNA project.
A little bit about the Concrete Design Initiative. We are a design and community development organization that's been in existence for the last 14, 15 years or so. And we partner with under-resourced communities to advance equity and to activate the unrealized potential in their neighborhoods and cities. In terms of who we are, we're a team of a multidisciplinary team comprising landscape architects, urban planners, civil engineers, architects, community organizers, researchers, and engineers and others working on all sorts of different types of projects. We've been working in Kibera, an informal settlement in Nairobi, which probably most of you have heard of. And we've been partnering there with community-based organizations. A lot of the work we've been doing with them has been around building public spaces, but alongside that, turning spaces which are currently waste spaces or spaces with environmental degradation, usually on rivers, into spaces where we can develop green and gray solutions. So we've done, a lot of these sites, as I've said, are often on rivers. they'll have various environmental critical challenges such as pollution, such as flooding, and we've done a lot of work in terms of rehabilitating these spaces, looking at the impact of grey and green approaches in terms of looking at CBA, and specifically in partnership with CBOs. I think a lot of my colleagues will be able to cover a lot more specifically on the type of work that we've been doing through some examples.
So Joe, can you please touch on challenges linked to accessing finance, but also in showcasing the impact of your work?
Yes, thanks, Sabrina. I think it's a good question because as a civil society organization, we have to think about the scale that we're operating and what type of programs that we can connect to finance community-based adaptation work at the local scale. I would say that one of the successes and opportunities we've had in that regard is actually partnering with research organizations. So for example, we have a large 3-year program which is funded by the Swedish Research Council and in partnership with Stockholm University and the Technical University of Kenya, which is to build and evaluate 3 community responsive adaptation projects which combine soft and hard adaptation measures at the local scale, but also are connecting to municipal level programs as well. So really working on the concept of citizen city adaptation, but more than anything trying to build robust evidence of the performance of these types of systems from a perspective of cost, from a perspective of social and economic indicators, and trying to capture that in a quantitative and qualitative sense. So I would say that's one avenue for both attracting funding to CBA work, but also to sharing evidence as well. I think a positive experience that we've had is working with partners at Swedbio and the Stockholm Resilience Center, who are funding work to translate resilience thinking into development practice. And our partners at Swedbio have supported us and our colleagues in Tanzania, the Center for Community Initiatives, to again produce concrete examples of non-concrete nature-based solutions to water management at the local scale, and to build evidence, not just performance data, but also narratives, stories, qualitative and documentary evidence of how these systems can work at a local scale and build stewardship for nature-based solutions.
So Vera, could you tell us a bit about your experience in taking part in the UNA walking workshop in Kisumu?
Thanks a lot, Sabrina. I think just to say we had a really exciting opportunity last August 2019 to participate in the Urban Tinkering Walking Workshop. And through that also getting to meet a lot of the people who are going to be attending this session and really learning more about ICLEI's work. The workshop was held in Kisumu, and the aim of it was to provide a reflective space for Kenya-based stakeholders, both at the city and the county, to really engage in safe, inclusive discussions alongside active engagement and contributions from leading experts in the urban natural asset management and planning space. And the walking workshop methodology, which and the urban tinkering approach by Elmqvist was really utilized during the session. So we were able to really take a well-organized transect walk through Kisumu. And maybe one thing to note, which is a really key highlight for us, was the opportunities that lay there, because the rivers that we saw there were really a lot cleaner than the ones we're used to in Kibera. There's quite a lot more nature than you might expect in some space, and you could really see that there was some good opportunities there. Some really mixed groups as well in the way that the workshop was undertaken and how we walked. And I think that intentional mixing of people and disciplines and backgrounds through that our work was really, really productive in terms of exchanging ideas of what was possible in terms of tinkering along the river. And then we were really also able to present a bit about our experience in implementing nature-based solutions in Kibera. And then also just for us, I think a big key learning was learning lessons from the wider ICLEI-led UNA program, which I think to some extent has been able to influence some of the work we're now doing with SwedBio on the nature-based solutions project.
On the perspective of nature-based solutions, we can see through our work how they have the potential to provide a low input, low cost solution to some of the most urgent challenges posed by climate change, also by rapid urbanization, and through the loss of green space in sub-Saharan Africa's expanding informal settlements. However, there are very few examples of successful approaches in this challenging context. So our work and our project with SwedBio has been focused on trying to contribute to this knowledge baseline. Very few approaches over the years have been rigorously evaluated from social, ecological, and technical perspectives. So our approach has been to learn through doing and evaluating up to 20 new nature-based solutions built over the last year and a half in Nairobi and Dar es Salaam. So this, we hope, will contribute to the much needed robust knowledge base for nature-based solutions within the informal settlements.
As you've heard, our approach has been working at the very local scale on river remediation, on nature-based solutions, on water management, but we've also been working with universities and municipal partners to think about the watershed scale and how our local interventions can connect to and support those larger scale initiatives. And this is where we see such a complementarity with the work of UNA, which really works at the watershed scale, working with municipal actors, working across regional boundaries, political boundaries, and really understanding the social and ecological factors at play, which you have to think about at the larger scale. So we see the potential of the watershed level approach connecting to local action and resident-led and resident-informed adaptation measures. And we think that that's really the future of urban river remediation and ecological function in the context of future cities.
Various approaches for community activation in relation to urban planning have been implemented under this project, and one such tool is called the Minecraft. The UN Habitat, through their global program on public spaces, has effectively been using Minecraft as a catalyst to improve governance and increase the levels of participation, efficiency, and accountability in the development and implementation of public urban policies. In particular, Minecraft has been found to best enable engagement of youth and marginalized groups in planning. Due to the success of the tool, LoCS4Africa, in partnership with Addis Ababa City Authority and the UN Habitat, made use of this approach in designing an implementable plan for a pilot site along the river in Addis Ababa. The video that is about to play shows participatory planning of rivers and riversides in Addis Ababa using Minecraft approach.
ተመሳሳይ ሞዴል ተሰርቷል። ይህንን የሚመስል ይህን አካባቢ እንዳለ የሚመስል ነገር በማይንክራፍት ሞዴል ተሰርቷል። ኮምፒውተሮቻችን ላይ ያለ ማለት ነው። አሁን እዚህ የመጣ ነው ከላይ ጀምሮ እናያለን ያሉትን ችግሮች አይደንቲፋይ ያደረግን።
Public space is everything. We have to have like more public space in the city. Addis Ababa city is doing a lot of things these days, and we are seeing a positive result from our engagement with the city administration.
I'm really excited about seeing what kind of ideas that will be generated during the workshop later today and the coming days. To see what all these different actors will suggest for this site.
About the differences you see from here to the real site. Unbelievable. Why? What is the difference?
This kind of workshop helps the community to involve and participate for sustainable environmental situation. Those people who are involved in this workshop can get more information how they can keep their environment more clean, clear, and comfortable for their life.
We're trying to protect it through this project by trying to firstly map out the really great nature in the city, and then trying to link that to the planning so that it's taken seriously in development plans and really informs development in future in Addis so that nature is really protected.
ላይ ደግሞ ወተን ጫፍ ላይ የሰራነው እንደ መዝናኛ ቦታ ነው ያደረግነው። አሁን እንደምን ማለት ነው ላይ ፓርት ላይ ያለው ማለት ነው።
This workshop is very interesting. We have got lots of new ideas and knowledge that can be implemented and applied in rivers and riversides, and some rubbish areas can be cleaned and more. It can be more attractive for the residents of the city and as well as the visitors. So this Minecraft gives us lots of knowledge that can be used to implement in the future time.
An integral part of the Una Rivers program design is to support better coordination between city councils, local organizations, and communities, as well as to foster community-based activities and engage citizens in being stewards of their own cities. So a method called photo voice can help to visualize the changes taking place during a project, such as, for example, the waste management initiative. At the same time, photo voice invites diverse perspectives from groups of citizens whose voices are sometimes not heard, such as women and marginalized groups. So photo voice is basically an action-oriented participatory method that invites participants in a project to take photographs as a way of telling their own stories through images that represent their points of views at a particular moment in time. So the video that is about to play showcases how a community's waste management project can be visualized using photo voice.
My name is Steven Jiwinjira. I'm the founder and executive director of Our World International. This is a waste management non-profit organization, and I just decided to start this organization to create more opportunities from the waste, something which was regarded as useless, and just turn it into something useful.
The name of the city is derived from the name of the river, Lilongwe, and it passes through right in the middle of the city, and historically is a very important river because it is the river that ecosystemically supports the city.
There is a direct link between waste and composting. The biodegradable waste can decompose and then turn into soil or compost, and so which can be used it can be used as fertilizer. And you know, Malawi is agro-based economy, and so a lot of people rely heavily on fertilizer. And with the economic hardship we're going through, I guess this is just a perfect solution to a lot of farmers and a lot of people.
So this is a demonstration that you can make organic manure from waste, and if they do that, then we'll be keeping our rivers clean, our city clean, and our country clean, thereby making the whole world clean.
Manyowa silika kuti igoro titapita kumuzi chokwa pano padikhoza ukazipangira tokha manyowa kuthira kumundu chimene chocho nchimene chinapindulapo
kusintha kuliro kwene kuti panthawi imene tizene tusintha kumatha peno bwera pamvezi kuti pasintha.
A picture is worth 1,000 words, and we want to make it more interesting and get these people to be a part of the project so we can share the message right across the globe.
Ndamaliza baja anthu kundifusa ine ndikauza anthu aja kuti mapanga zakuti kunalisokosa buda kuti anthu aja uthenga amaumva so nthawi yomweyo kuti apo kuyambira mawu satani ndi satani.
We would like people to be educated and trained how they can manage waste on their own.
Mano winali aende udindo amena ubanga business pano au oyo sasa neno mambo no beach for anthu apusira zambiri ndekuti longo anthu singawathuona wabwera.
This project is very important. It was supposed to have been done yesterday.
Well, I think the main highlight for the project has been the photo voice. This is something that I've done it for the first time, and it's really been great, and a lot of people loved it. It's been a tool that has provided us with a lot of mechanism to get feedback from the people, and also made us to imagine a lot of things, and it's given us a whole lot of other ideas about the project.
Okay, please can I ask you to introduce yourself, your name, title and organization, and your role within the UNA program.
Hi, I'm Thomas Elmqvist. I'm a professor in natural resource management at the Stockholm Resilience Center, Stockholm University, Sweden, and I'm a member of the advisory board of the UNA program.
Thank you so much. And would you mind sharing with us where the UNA projects and the program came from?
Well, it goes way, way back, actually to the COP10 meeting in Nagoya, when the Convention on Biological Diversity started to include local governments. There was a decision 1022 with a strategic plan for how local governments could start working with biodiversity and ecosystem services as part of implementing the convention. And then an idea came up that we need a network, we need to start with practice and implementation programs all around the world, really. And so the initial network that started to develop ideas around this was called URBIS, Urban Biodiversity. And it was partly an initiative by myself, but also Christina Avsen from UNESCO, and ICLE was deeply involved from the beginning. So this network developed eventually into the UNA program, which is now grown to become quite large, and there are so many different activities going on, which you have heard about. So I would say that it has a history that goes at least 10 years back in time.
And as an advisory board member for the UNA program, what do you see as the critical value add?
Well, there's several. I would say for one is that I think UNA is one of the pioneering programs that actually are launching and implementing ideas around nature-based solutions in African cities, how nature could be part of very effective adaptation programs to climate change, but also be very effective in many other respects when it comes to reducing air pollution or providing nutritious food for people living in urban and peri-urban areas. So I think there's something we do now that is really appealing, and I would like to summarize it as UNA is working on how nature could be used to reconnect people. So reconnect people to nature, but also reconnect people through nature, that there is a strong participatory and social dimension, which I think is equally important.
And leading on from that, what would you see as the greatest achievement of the UNA program to date?
There's so many, but I think all those activities around developing bottom-up ideas around nature-based solutions to address the many, many challenges that people are facing in rapidly growing African cities is so valuable. And all the pioneering, really cutting-edge activities like a walking workshop that was held in Kisumu around the idea of urban tinkering, which I assume will be described or have been described, I think was also very, very innovative. And hopefully that will be replicated in many, many places in the future.
Now we are zooming in to look at some of the resources developed by the UNA program. The UNA Sustainable Use of Urban Natural Assets Handbook aims to provide insight into strategies and examples of sustainable approaches to use urban natural assets to generate livelihoods. Africa's landscape is a mosaic of natural assets, and these natural resources drive the economy as well as other human activities. In Africa, pressures on natural resources are only expected to intensify as the majority of the world's population growth in the near future is projected to take place on the African continent. We also face additional challenges of traditional practices that rely heavily on natural assets for livelihoods. And in the face of these significant pressures, there's really a need for innovative and alternative strategies to ensure sustainable use of natural assets. The handbook covers 4 aspects, namely urban forests, urban wetlands, urban rivers, and urban estuarine and coastal systems, providing examples such as restoration and replanting of mangroves, guidance on how to make eco-bricks, and establishing community-based wetland cleanups, amongst others. The CNAM, or the Nacala Coastal Natural Asset Management Plan, has been co-developed by LoCS4Africa in partnership with the municipality of Nacala and aims to guide Nacala with the management of their coastal zone that lies within its boundaries. The objectives of the plan are threefold. Firstly, to improve knowledge and understanding of the coastal natural assets found within the boundaries of Nacala. Secondly, to provide data that can be used to support spatial planning. and finally, to provide guidance for the protection, conservation, and rehabilitation of coastal natural assets found within Nacala. While the guideline has been developed specifically to support the municipality of Nacala, other entities such as national government, other local governments, national and state marine park managers, and port authorities will also find the information included useful. In 2018, the process of developing a review of opportunities for public-private partnerships to harness nature-based solutions in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia was initiated. The document aimed to provide support to Addis in identifying opportunities to create public-private partnerships to implement nature-based solutions in the city. The outcomes and findings from the first draft were presented to the Addis Ababa Mayor and Council in November 2018, and this has opened doors to other opportunities, such as the Addis Resilience Office has requested to develop an innovative finance strategy for nature-based solutions to support their existing work. The national government of Tanzania is moving towards taking formal steps to protect and enhance nature as they expand to accommodate their mushrooming populations. ICLEI Africa has been assisting and facilitating this process to ensure nature is prioritized and effectively integrated into the country's planning processes. In Tanzania, urban development is guided by the Tanzanian National Planning Guidelines. However, this document hasn't been updated for more than a decade. Fortunately for cities across Tanzania, including Dar es Salaam, in 2018, the Ministry of Lands, Housing and Human Settlements Development expressed a need to revise these guidelines to include more current legislation, as well as addressing new urban challenges, including but not limited to planning for climate change resilience by incorporating nature into the city. As part of the Una Rivers for Life project, ICLEI Africa has appointed senior researchers from Adi University, based in Dar es Salaam, to investigate and develop recommendations for updating these guidelines. The outcomes have been developed into a formal recommendations report to update the 2007 Tanzania Planning Guidelines, and this has been presented to national government to take forward. In Mozambique, we have been working with the city of Nacala and Kilimani to build capacity in respect to financing for nature-based solutions through the lens of climate resilience at the local level. Through our discussions with both Kilimani and Nacala, they have both raised the need that they want to build their capacity in designing projects that can attract funding for on-the-ground implementation, working towards building local resilience. With this in mind, ICLEI has been working with a team of consultants to develop 5 project concepts, one of which will be selected to be developed into a pre-feasibility level in order to seek financing and support on-the-ground implementation.
The Sustainable River-Based Urban Planning for Sub-Saharan Africa guidelines have been developed to inform decision-making among development practitioners about the values of rivers and the need to consider rivers in decision-making processes. They've also been developed to arm practitioners with practical tools for including riverine considerations in their planning processes. And last but not least, these guidelines have been developed to support planners with responding to land use planning applications, as well as guide land use planners with development planning in the future, which includes rivers. The Sustainable River-Based Urban Planning for Sub-Saharan Africa guidelines are accompanied by a document that includes a couple of case studies. And these case studies are divided into 4 primary themes, which include community participation, urban flooding, multiple stakeholder engagement, and climate change adaptation. Each of these themes contain case study examples of both successful and unsuccessful river rehabilitation projects, methodologies undertaken, as well as lessons learned from the various projects. The Tsuka and Lizulu informal markets in Lilongwe have been identified as significant point sources of pollution along the Lilongwe River, with associated challenges including encroachment into the river buffer zones, urban agriculture on the river banks, and waste dumping alongside and in the river. Both markets are of high importance for the provision of livelihoods, economic opportunities, and as integrated community spaces that are embedded in the urban framework of the city.
Based on this significance and the importance of these markets to the community of Lilongwe, the Lilongwe City Council highlighted the Tsuka and Lizulu markets as the pilot site for a river revitalization project. An important output of this piece of work is a landscape master plan that LoCS4Africa under the Una Rivers project has developed. Prior to the development of the Lilongwe-Lingadi Ecological River Corridor Strategy Plan, it was critical to undertake an extensive and inclusive stakeholder engagement process in order to gather all relevant information and inputs from key stakeholders for inclusion in the plan. And in order to achieve this, as part of the Una Rivers project, we engaged with stakeholders from various Lilongwe City Council departments as well as private organizations within the city through meetings and workshops around sustainable river management. And so the training workshops inspired a strong desire to both protect and use the Lilongwe-Lingadi Ecological Corridor wisely. And so the future of this ecological corridor as the heart and soul of Lilongwe City depends on the large-scale and collective effort of all key role players. So this work will conserve the great value of the city's natural assets and allow the people of Lilongwe to benefit from the area of ecosystem services that this ecological corridor may provide. Therefore, the aim of this document is therefore to provide a strategy for a collective movement towards the establishment and implementation of an ecological corridor system for the Lilongwe City Council.
So with this, we close the multimedia showcase, and we would like to invite back Jess, UNA's program manager. Jess, thank you so much for coming back into the session and joining us. We'd like to just ask you a few more questions. Obviously, we've gone through the outputs of UNA. Could you share some of the biggest impacts of the UNA program?
Sure, thanks, Taryn. So this has actually been such a great process in terms of consolidating all of our evidence, resources, and outputs under the program to really start to see kind of what pathways of impact we have been able to influence or make change in. And we've summarized the impact under 8 pathways, as we call them. So the first one is practice reform. The second one is policy reform. We also have the impact for mainstreaming, impact for capacity building. We feel we've made change under gender equality and also informality. And then finally, in terms of localizing the international pathways or international frameworks and agendas, as well as really pushing the boundary with experiment and innovation. And we currently are drafting these impacts to show the amount of change we've made under those pathways into impact stories. So watch this space because we'll be sharing those shortly.
Thanks, Jess. And would you like to maybe share with the delegates who joined us today a key take-home message?
Great. I think one of the key take-home messages from the program is that process really is everything. The project is really, as I said earlier, has prioritized needs, it's prioritized these spaces of coming together, reflecting knowledge creation together. And through the evidence and the impact that we are starting to see that with the change we have actually made, it shows that those softer processes are really, really critical in making long-term change. So I would say take those very, very seriously and build in spaces for knowledge, learning, and reflection in future engagements in urban spaces.
Thanks, Jess. And that's a powerful message for all the delegates, no matter what sector they're joining us from today. We'd like to thank everybody who's participated in this session for joining us on this whirlwind tour of the UNA program. And we'd invite you to join us for the remainder of the LoCS sessions. And please do feel free to check out the ICLEI Cities Biodiversity Center website, where all of the UNA program resources are housed.